Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we are diving into the wild story of Albert Göring, a guy who did the opposite of what his brother did. His brother Hermann Göring was Hitler's right-hand man. But Albert? He exploited his family name to fight the Nazis and save people facing persecution. This video will talk about Albert's deeds of defiance against his brother's regime and the complicated nature of Albert and Hermann Göring's relationship throughout their lives. For those who don't know, I want to briefly explain who Hermann Goring was. Goring was a decorated fighter pilot from World War I, whose intense nationalism and bitterness towards the German defeat in the First World War led him to join Hitler in 1922 during the very early days of the Nazi movement. His status as a war hero as well as his aristocratic background allowed Hitler to appeal and seem less radical to Germany's conservative elites and military officials. This would be critical in allowing Hitler to eventually rise to power. Standing by Hitler throughout the entire rise of the Nazis, he was named Reichsmarschall in 1935, the highest military rank in Germany. He was the clear-cut second in command of the Third Reich after Adolf Hitler, and remained in that position until the final defeat of the Nazis in 1945. Hermann Göring and his younger brother Albert were born into a prominent German family. Their father was the colonial governor of German Southwest Africa. Hermann, the older brother, loved danger and dreamed of being a soldier. Albert, he was quieter, into books and music. When their father, Heinrich, died in 1913, Hermann became a father-like figure to Albert. They both fought as soldiers in World War I. Hermann became a famous fighter pilot ace. Albert less glamorously fought in the trenches and likely saw more of the horrors of the war up close, compared to his brother, who fought from the sky. After the war, Hermann joined the Nazis, but Albert hated what the National Socialist Party stood for. Despite their ideological differences, Hermann gave Albert money to survive in the 1920s. Albert later said, "Without Hermann, I would have starved." But they argued constantly about politics. Throughout the 1920s, Albert openly opposed the Nazi movement his brother had become a part of. When Hitler seized power in 1933, Hermann became Reichsmarschall, second in command only to Hitler. Albert, now a film producer in Austria, openly criticized his brother's government, which wasn't exactly known for championing free speech or dissent. When Hermann's party violently seized power in 1933, Albert was horrified. He wrote his brother in 1934, "How can you support a regime that beats innocent people in the streets?" "I'm ashamed to be your brother." Hermann replied, "Stay out of politics. You don't understand the bigger picture." In 1935, they had a heated argument when Albert refused to Nazi salute at Hermann's house in front of his brother's subordinates. However, behind the scenes, Hermann still sent Albert money and gifts, even as they fought. Albert later told friends, "Hermann and I shared blood, not beliefs. He saw Hitler as a messiah. I saw him as a madman." After Germany annexed Austria in 1938, Albert began using his brother's influence to subvert the regime. He secured the release of his Jewish colleague Oskar Pilser from Dachau by threatening Gestapo officers with Hermann's wrath. When Pilser's wife and daughter were arrested, Albert stormed the Gestapo office, demanding, "Release them, or I'll have my brother transfer you to the Eastern Front." The family was freed. Once the war started, Albert was transferred to Czechoslovakia to work in an arms factory. It was here where he would intensify his resistance while navigating his brother's shadow. Albert used Hermann's name to forge exit permits for Jewish workers, labeling them essential to weapons production. Albert helped many Jews flee Nazi-occupied areas of Europe and helped them emigrate to England and the United States, where they would be safe. Hermann knew of Albert's actions but tolerated them. A 1939 Gestapo report noted Hermann's order to leave Albert alone. In 1942, the Gestapo arrested Albert for aiding partisans. Hermann intervened personally, securing his release with a warning, "Stop embarrassing me." After Germany's surrender in 1945, Allied forces arrested Albert. During interrogations, he admitted, "I used my brother's name to save lives, not to serve Hitler." After several Jewish individuals testified to Albert's actions on their behalf, Albert was let free with no charges. At the Nuremberg trials, Hermann was sentenced to death for war crimes. Albert refused to testify in his defense, stating, "He chose his path. I cannot absolve him." A friend said Albert cried when Hermann died, not out of sadness, but anger. "He wasted his life on Hitler," Albert said. Albert lived a modest life after the war. He worked as a translator and married his housekeeper in 1952. They resided in a small Munich apartment. Albert, despite his deeds against the Nazis, still often faced public persecution because of his last name. His deeds were not largely recognized until after his death in 1966. Friends of Albert said he felt traumatized from watching the brother he once loved dearly become someone who he couldn't recognize anymore. Albert reportedly once said, "His blind rage over the German loss of the First World War is what dominated every decision he made for the rest of his life." I would like to thank everyone who watched the entire video. I would greatly appreciate it if you could thumbs up this video. If you would like to learn about more interesting historical figures like Albert Göring, please subscribe to this channel. I plan to keep making more videos about unusual historical figures and events.